My name is Schmidt. We're here with Jennifer Warner. It's January 23rd, 2025. We're at the Nicholson Library at Linfield University in McMinnville. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
First question, as you know, is why wine?
Well, it has been a long and winding journey for me getting into wine. Definitely not something I intended to do or sought out to do, but throughout life, it's kind of just kept popping up in little experiences here and there. And you know, over several decades, it's turned into me now being a winemaker, which is kind of wild. I think if I could go back 10 or 20 years and tell myself that this is what I would be now doing kind of as a side hustle, I'd be like, that's wild. I grew up in Wisconsin, so alcohol, beer is a big part of our culture back there. So as a child, I was always around beer and brandy and stuff like that. But, you know, wine was not something I grew up. My family didn't drink wine. We didn't have wine in the house or anything like that. So, and just over the years, I've become to appreciate it from all these little experiences. And eventually I enrolled in Schmidt just kind of as like I need to do something for fun, and now I'm here. It's been a lot of little things just trickled throughout life that have led me to this path, but I'm really excited about it. I think there's a lot of hobbies and things you can do, but wine seems like this huge beast that no matter how much I study, learn, experience, do, there's no end. Mm-hmm. So that I'm really excited about, and yeah, I feel like I'm just starting to scratch the surface.
Tell me about the first sort of experience you had with wine, the first time you were kind of aware of it.
Well, I mean, in Wisconsin, we do drink a lot of brandy. So with that, there's also a lot of loyalty to the brand Korbel. So, I mean, around the holidays, we drink brandy old fashions, which people from the other part of the world kind of are like, what? You put brandy in your old fashions? So that loyalty to that brand kind of introduced me to sparkling wine in my early 20s, and that was something I always really enjoyed. And you know, as a 20-year-old, you're like, ooh, this is fancy, which, I mean, that's pretty much it. In fact, I was just back in Wisconsin about a week ago, and now that I'm in this wine world, I went to like one of these really big Costco-y type stores with my parents, and I was like, I want to see what you guys have. What are you producing in Wisconsin, you know? And they had a huge wine section and all of the normal varietals you'll see, but they had a Wisconsin section. So I was like, oh, what's going on over here? And they do have wines, mostly fruit wines, which, you know, people from Oregon are probably like, what? Like peach wine? No thanks. But I did find there was actually a small producer from Wisconsin that was making, you know, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, all that kind of stuff. And I haven't had a chance to try it yet, but yeah. And I actually, growing up, one of my dad's friends was one of these fruit winemakers too. So I had an experience with that as a younger adult too, and it wasn't pleasant. So it's just been a really long, slow introduction from, you know, those basic sparkling wines and being like, this is kind of interesting. And through life choices, I ended up here in the Willamette Valley before knowing we were in this huge producing region, which was chance, I guess. I don't know that my interest would have grown in it if I lived somewhere else in the world, but having all of this in our backyard has been a huge influence too, you know. Going around exploring different wineries, meeting different winemakers just for fun has definitely increased my interest in it.
So tell me about growing up in Wisconsin. What was your tell me about kind of life after high school. Where were you headed?
Sure. I started working in a law firm at like 19 and excelled at it. I had a really great career there, great job, and was working my way through undergrad. I think my original major was marketing, which has not been helpful. I've been in business my whole life, but those early marketing classes certainly did not help at all. But being a couple years into my career, I did change my major then to legal studies, and just figured it would help where I was headed at that point. But once I graduated, was still working for the same firm, I was like, I guess the next step is to go to law school. So I did. I studied for the LSATs. I think I ended up taking it twice. I was never very good at school or testing or that kind of stuff. I was always like, how do I get through this as quickly as possible? Like, to make it as painless as possible and get through it. Not as much focused on the grades and, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I took the LSAT, and then I was like, I guess the next step, if I'm going to be in this field, is to go to law school. All of the attorneys I worked with advised against it, like, just please do anything else besides go to law school. I did not take their advice. Looking back on it, maybe I should have, but so at that point, I started applying to law schools. I was still in Wisconsin at this point. It was the middle of winter, and traditionally law school always starts in fall. But I had gotten a couple of offers for spring start, and I was looking to move somewhere warm and took the first offer I got. I immediately packed up, moved to Arizona, and I think I started law school a few weeks later. It was pretty wild. So yeah, then that was my career for a short time.
What kind of law?
The firm I started with, I was at a bankruptcy law firm, and that's what I continued to go on and do for part of my career. Not fun at all. I think people who go into that career, or people who think about that career, are always like, ooh, like being a lawyer is fun and glamorous. It's not. It's like being a winemaker a lot in that respect, where it's not as pretty as it looks from the outside. Most people who are going to an attorney, it's not a positive time in their life. Divorce, bankruptcy, stuff like this. It's usually not a fun experience for anyone involved. So yeah, I did that for a few years, and then I slowly just kind of trickled around the legal world, and I'm still doing that as my full-time job now. I'm not practicing law, but I'm in a legal adjacent field at this point. So it's definitely taken me to where I'm at, and it was a great experience. The schooling built some grit, for sure. I mean, it's not an easy experience, so nor is the testing and all of that stuff. So yeah, I think I wouldn't have changed anything at this point, but it definitely wasn't where I fit. It was, round peg, square hole kind of thing.
How did you get to Oregon?
So I, at the time, was at the end of my legal career practicing. I was ready to make some big life changes. I was ready to be done with that career. I was ready to move on and do something different. And the guy who I was dating at the time, who's now my husband, he really had a draw to Portland. He had been up here a few times. He was a computer programmer at that time, so there was a huge pull just kind of up to this area, San Francisco, Portland. He was up here often for conferences and stuff like that, and he was like, it's amazing, you have to come up here and check it out. And we did a 4 or 5 day trip to Portland, and I was like, this is insane. Like, this is where I'm supposed to be, So I think 3 or 4 months later, I quit my practice and we moved up here with no idea of what we were gonna do. He continued at that time working for the job he was with, remote, so it was kind of like, all right, you've got this figured out, and I guess I'll figure out what I'm gonna do in the meantime, because with practicing law, it wasn't like, I knew at that point I was done. The stress was beyond, and I was done with it. But also, like, transferring a license, it wasn't something I could easily do at that point. So I was like, I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do with my life now, which that was, 10 years ago now already. So a lot of time has passed. The first few years, a lot of flailing and figuring out what I was going to do with my life, and I, did little side jobs here and there, and contracting jobs, and got through it, and yeah, it was an interesting time. But being out here, it was totally worth it. So, and so we originally moved to Beaverton, and spent, about five or so years there, and then as housing prices and rents and all that started increasing, we were like, this is getting kind of nuts. What are we going to do? So we started looking for a home, and then eventually settled in Salem, and have been there for like 7 years now, which is awesome. Salem is, I think when we moved there, a lot of people were like, you're going to move to Salem? Like, are you sure? And it's changed a lot for the better since we've been there too. So we're like, yeah, it was a good bet. It worked out really well.
You mentioned sort of getting into sort of a legal adjacent field. Tell me about, after sort of flailing around, finding your footing and doing what is now your day job.
Yeah, so after coming from the bankruptcy world, I kind of flipped heads and went to the opposite dark side of collections, which was even more soul-sucking than the legal side of practicing. But it paid the bills and got me through, and it was kind of easy work that I could handle at that moment. And it was really strange. I was working for evil landlords and trying to collect debts that they were owed, and I just got this really weird feeling about, like, there's got to be a better way of doing this. Like, the typical process is you're finding people and garnishing their wages, and it's just really icky. And growing up, I was kind of always, like, really good at finding people and finding things, and, like, thinking back about it, I should have probably been, like, a private investigator or something, because, growing up, like, if my girlfriends would go out on a date with someone, they'd like, find out what he's up to or whatever, and that was just kind of always my thing. And anyways, I'm like thinking of ways to make this better, and I stumbled upon one of these people that had a ton of money owed to them from an estate. And I was like, that's interesting. And so I started going through all my old client files and finding that a lot of these people were owed money from estates and that we could collect it for them. So that led me to just a series of chances, led me into this business I do now, where I help heirs and businesses find money that's owed to them. So it's a very niche market that I work in. Like, anytime I tell people what I do for a living, they're like, what? Like, I've never heard of this in my life. So essentially, we work off of lists from states of all these unclaimed funds that get turned over, and we help them collect them. So it's really weird. But it's interesting. It kind of satisfies my urge to, like, find unknown things and search stuff out and find people. And we work with people from all over the world, and it's definitely an interesting day job, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. So I started that business, about 6 years ago at this point. It was a very slow growth at first. And, I was working off of like Excel spreadsheets, and it was not efficient at all. And my husband, with his background in computer programming, he eventually joined me about 3 years ago and built out all these huge systems for us to work with. And now we've got a couple of employees who work for us. And then I was like, I got this going for me. Now it's time to pivot and focus my energy on something else rather than just, be comfortable. So it kind of was perfect timing that business is kind of working. It's still very demanding, but now I have a little bit of free time to now focus on this new endeavor of winemaking.
That is a very interesting niche job. It's there.
Crazy.
I love it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, you mentioned kind of wine being kind of somewhat familiar before you dove into it. Tell me about when you got to Oregon. What would you say your relationship was with wine? Were you a passionate consumer? Were you interested at all in it?
Not really. Again, growing up in Wisconsin, like beer was a huge part of our culture, and I never enjoyed beer at all. I mean, a big part of every social interaction. I mean, people in Wisconsin drink beer at church. I mean, it's it's kind of unholy to not be a beer drinker there. So as a young adult, I kind of immediately drifted into cider, and that became a huge passion for me, and that kind of is what pulled me into this as well. So no, not really. My wine, outside of having, some Corbel Brut, with orange juice, or a glass of house red with a steak, that was kind of the extent of it. Now, obviously, doing the program at Chemeketa and learning about wine, it's been a huge part of my life, but it's a lot to learn still, and a lot to drink and consume, and I've been taking a lot of tasting classes, which has been really awesome because I feel like I've got a lot of catching up to do in that regard, but yeah, I mean, socially and as a consumer, I always was a cider drinker, and we're also in a great part of the country for that too, so but they're not that different, so slowly consuming cider, I would start seeing ciders that had a little bit of rosé in them or things like that, so that kind of also helped my curiosity into wine.
So given that, what prompted you to go to Chemeketa for wine classes in the first place?
So during COVID, I wanted to start making cider. Not seriously, but so I did. I started making cider at home and playing around with that, and we had a lot of access to different orchards and stuff around here that were pressing fresh juice. So I started doing that, and I was like, I really want to learn more about this besides than just the internet and, what little information I could find at that point. So I was like, all right, there's got to be a cider school or something around here. And there are some options, but not as many options as there are for wine. So I was like, well, I guess I can try going to Chemeketa, and maybe I can translate this wine knowledge to cider making, and maybe that'll all make sense. And I also was like, this will just be something fun to go do too, just get out of the house, especially after COVID. It's like, let's get out of the house, let's go do something. And yeah, so I started just taking, I think I've been going there for about 1.5 to 2 years now, but just taking one class a semester and, feeling it out, learning about things. And after my first class, I was immediately drawn in, like, this is so cool. Like, cider's cool, but wine's a lot more fun.
Tell me about the program and what excited you about it.
So the first class I took there was their Intro to Winemaking class, which is the best class to take as someone who has even no experience or a little experience, because you immediately get thrown into the winery and get to make wine. It's on a much smaller scale than what you would be doing in a winery, but they have the vineyard there, so. And I was fortunate enough, I had no idea, but I took it in fall. So we got to harvest the grapes, we got to press the grapes, we got to do all that kind of stuff, which as my first class and experience there, I was just like, wow, this is so cool. Like, I had so much envy for the 20-year-olds that were in my class, just like, this is so cool that you're here doing this as a 20-year-old. Like, what, like, mind blown that there were people that were that young that were like, I want to do this. Like, there were a few people in my class that were my age that were just kind of like, yeah, I'm just here to kind of learn and I'm interested in this. But yeah, I was just immediately sucked in after that. So the wine didn't turn out that great though. I mean, we made a Pinot Noir on a really small scale, and we weren't doing punch downs or anything like that. So, you get what you make, but it was still a really cool experience. And I think our class ended a few weeks before Thanksgiving, so I got to bring home, 4 bottles of wine that I had made, and we glugged it down, but it was like, this is really cool. At that point, I didn't have any ambitions of making wine, but I just knew that I was really interested in continuing to learn and try wines and continue through that program and see where it takes me.
So tell me about the process of learning, not just the making wine, but sort of the world of wine, the culture of wine, the language of wine. What has the process been like for you, and how did it grow as you continued to go to class?
It's been incredibly overwhelming. I mean, going through law school, I was like, I got this. This will be a piece of cake. But I've been studying now for 2 years, and I feel like I know nothing still, which is really exciting. And I don't know where it will continue to take me, but the fact that there's just like this endless pool of knowledge to learn from is really exciting. And I also don't have any kind of science background at all, so like having to go back and take chemistry, which I haven't done yet, is really daunting, but I'm super excited about it. So yeah, there's just a lot to learn, a lot of culture. I would love to travel to some of these different wine regions and actually understand the culture, Definitely got a lot of those things on my bucket list to do here in the future, but just exploring Oregon in itself has been endless. I mean, there's so many old wine producers that are here. There's so many people who've been producing for a decade. There's people who've been producing for a year. Just to hear all their stories and kind of how they've gotten into this industry has been really fun. And the history of the different vineyards that are out here. There's so much to explore, and I don't know that I'll ever get to all of it, which is really exciting.
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
I feel that pain. So tell me about you took the class, you got excited about it, but you didn't have any ambitions yet of making wine. So tell me about how that started to change.
So my next steps after I got through those first classes, I took Intro to Winemaking, and then I took Wine Marketing. Painful. That was kind of like a flashback to my first year of college. It was helpful, but not, it's a marketing class. It's just focused on a subject. I still kind of really wanted to pursue cider. Being an entrepreneur, I was like, I know there's a way I can do this. I got to find the right opportunity, got to figure it out, got to figure out a space that I can make cider out of. At the same time, I was still at home kind of experimenting with my own ciders and making a lot of mistakes, throwing away a lot of cider, enjoying some of it. Some of it turned out really well. So I also, with my law background, I started looking through the requirements for making, and for cider and wine, they're the same. So that was helpful. I just kind of started delving into different facilities and like, how much is this going to cost? Like, okay, this might be out of my budget at this point. So I thought my next step was to take, OSU has a cider intensive that's I think 2 weeks long or a week long. And it's pretty expensive for, what it is. I mean, it's a great course and I still would love to take it, but I was like, okay, I think that's what I'm going to do next. That's what I'm going to focus on and start saving for and go do that. And then maybe something else will click at that point. I mean, at that point, I had no experience on large equipment. So I was like, if I'm going to try and do this, I need to learn how to use these big machines and stuff. So that was my plan. And then it all changed. Chemeketa had sent out an email about a wine incubator program, and the deadline that they had listed on it had already passed. So I was like, this is probably just, junk at this point. So I reached out to the facility who was advertising this program, and I'm like, hey, the deadline's passed already. Are you guys still looking for someone? Because if I have to put a resume together, like, this is going to take me a few days. I've been self-employed for a decade now. I don't have a resume. And the owner, Carrie, replied back to me, and she's like, yeah, we're still looking for people. And I'm like, okay. Dropped everything, spent the whole weekend putting together a resume, which had nothing to do with winemaking. So, I'm like trying to tailor it towards anything that could relate back to winemaking. It couldn't. And I put together a pretty thoughtful cover letter and kind of explained what I had done at this point. I think I had taken WSET 1 at that point already too. So the next week they called me and I was like, oh my God, is this happening? Like, there's no way. I'll go do the interview and, whatever. I'll get some experience. I'll get to see a winery. That'll be fun. And I think a few days later they're like, we picked you. And I was like, okay. Let's do this. So yeah, it was a very wild experience. I mean, that was in May of this year. So by June, I was like, okay, I got to figure out how to fund this. I mean, granted, they've waived all the costs and stuff, so that's been a huge help. But I mean, I still had to come up with my grapes and licensing and insurance and transportation and I mean all this stuff, which really adds up. So yeah, this has been an insane year. And I didn't produce a ton, but I mean, I did do 2 tons, but not like a ton of wine. So yeah, it was a long, long year, but exciting, super exciting. And trying to juggle a full-time job and all that, it's been a challenge, but I got through it.
Tell me about approaching that. Obviously, that's starting fairly late in the year, given that harvest is just a few months after that. So tell me about how you approached that and how you got yourself prepared for harvest.
I mean, they were great. So part of their program, I mean, ABP just had opened the year prior to that. So they're also brand new to all of this too, but part of their program was that they would be helping me through all those steps, which they have. It's actually been a really awesome blend of, if you need help, we'll help you, but we want you to also, kind of figure out these steps, make your own relationships, all of that kind of stuff, which has been perfect for me. I mean, I've been working independently for a decade, so, I come with that baggage. Mm-hmm. But whenever I need to be like, help, they can, kind of step in. So we initially set up and kind of, these are the things you're going to need. This is the amount of money you're going to need. Here's contacts for grapes. Here's contacts for all of this other stuff. And, they've kind of set me up for being able to be independent, but still have them to fall back on for any of these little questions, which they come up all the time. So it kind of was this perfect blend of, this is your brand and you're starting it, but we're here to support you in whatever way. So, and I think Carrie, where part of her huge passion is kind of fostering these small wineries. And I think she started ABP because she saw small wineries getting pushed out of these bigger facilities where, people were making 2 or 3 tons. And then it was like, well, now you got to make 5 or 6 tons or you're out. So it's been really exciting working there with all the other small producers. And I'm working with another person in this incubator program. So, we're kind of on the same level, even though he has a ton more experience than I do. It's kind of like whenever we run into each other, we're like, are we doing this? This is crazy. But we're getting through it together. So yeah, it's been, I think now that we're in January, I'm already thinking about like, okay, assuming that I can sell this wine that I have made, I have a lot of decisions I need to start thinking about for 2025 where, yeah, kind of starting doing that in June is kind of crazy. So, but it was awesome.
Tell me about figuring out what you wanted to make your first year and sort of the ethos of your brand? What did you want to represent?
Yeah. So along with all that kind of mentorship that I've gotten, one of the first meetings we had, Carrie, reached out to us and she's like, okay, I want you guys to start thinking about varietals. Both myself and Randall, who's in this program, were like kind of ambitious, like, okay, well, we can do 2 tons. That is what they provided to us, equipment wise and all of that. And it's like, well, should we do a half ton of this and a half ton of this? And then we're like, no, that's not gonna work out so well. So they kind of pushed us to like, let's not make more than 2 varietals. If you want to be really ambitious, you can do more. But like, if we were you, we would stick with 1 or 2. So at that point, they're like, okay, what kind of wines are you guys interested in? And Carrie pulled stuff from her cellar and brought us like 30 wines to sit down and try and go through those. And trying wines, I had immediately been drawn to Sauvignon Blanc as a cider drinker. It was kind of the closest thing. So I definitely knew I wanted to make some Sauvignon Blanc, which in Oregon is kind of unique. So it was like, all right, well, where the heck are we going to get Sauvignon Blanc from? I was really intimidated by doing reds because I don't have any experience with doing that yet. So I was like, I guess I want to do a rosé. So wasn't really sure on the varietal or anything like that. And then we just went through and we tried stuff. We tried all these wines they brought through, and I had a Sauvignon Blanc that was from Rogue Valley, and I was like, this is really crazy. I've never had anything like this before. So I was like, hopefully I can source some fruit from Southern Oregon, and I did, which was really awesome. And so far it is turning out very similar to that wine that I tried, which, is kind of how it should work, but having drank it and then picked it and then made it and have it actually turn out similar was like kind of mind-blowing. Like, wow, this actually worked. For the rosé, I didn't have anything particular in mind, but I was kind of like, I'm just gonna go out and kind of see what's available for varietals. And I made a connection with a grower that was also his first year. He had bought a home with a vineyard, and he was kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I have professionals managing my vineyard, but like, this is new to me. I don't know what I'm doing. And I was kind of like, me either. Like, let's work together. So we did. And it was really fun working with him because he was like a kid kind of running around in his vineyard. I think he has like 5 or 6 acres. So it's really small. But I immediately connected with him, and I was kind of like, oh, I want to come check it out, and I don't know what I'm looking for. I have no idea. So we're just like walking around and looking and like, oh yeah, this looks good. And thankfully the wine has turned out really good, but I wasn't really quite sure where I was going with it. So I was kind of like, we're from Oregon. If I can do a Pinot Noir rosé, that would be awesome. But I didn't have my heart necessarily set on anything. But after making that connection with him, and he had an entire vineyard full of Pinot Noir, it just kind of was like, I guess this is what I'm going to do. This feels right. So I know I'm also working with Corey and Christina, who I think you know as well. And I mean, Corey, his big focus is like your relationship with your grower is like number one. And I really wanted to try and make those connections with whoever I was working with from the jump. Because, you only get one chance a year to do this. So, once I kind of connected with that grower, I was like, okay, this is it. And I do think that he has some possibilities of maybe leasing his land or, so I was like, this could potentially work out being really good if I'm going to start producing more. So, just trying to grow those connections and make them from the beginning is what I was really focused on.
Tell me about the branding.
The branding. So branding is something I've always struggled with, and I really wanted to make this something super fun that I was excited about. And my husband and I think we literally brainstormed for weeks and weeks. And I kind of knew the imagery I wanted to put on the bottles, and I had that idea already. But I was like, I have no idea what to name this. And one of my professors at Schmidt was like, do not tell anybody your name or your brand name until you've got it figured out, you've got your trademark, you've got your LLC, you've got all that stuff done, because he had ran into some issues with that. And going through the trademarks and the LLCs and trying to figure out what's available, it's like, oh gosh, you got to get really creative, So I knew for the label I wanted it to be very like Gothic architecture was kind of the vibe I was going for, but also with like a little bit of feminine energy in there. So I put together thousands and thousands of name combinations. A lot of them were really bad, so bad. But I eventually settled on Dagger Daisy. I thought that I could make, this really cool art with like Gothic architecture and then like put little floral things inside of it. So I'm not an artist, but I do like to kind of monkey around with that stuff and, make different ideas. And I think after about a week or two, it grew on me, and I was like, okay, I think this is it. I'm going to file my trademark applications. I'm going to file my LLC. Like, when I started, everything moved so fast. It's like, I need to get an LLC put in place. Like, my lawyer brain's like, come on. So it was kind of rushed, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to go back and redo things. So, yeah, I think it'll be fun to. I'm just as excited about the branding and the art and all of that stuff as I am about the winemaking. I think there's so much that can be put into that stuff. So, yeah.
How about your first harvest, or first harvest as Dagger Daisy? How did it go?
It was interesting. So talking about those relationships with growers, I had initially made contact with a grower in Southern Oregon who was going to deliver my fruit, piece of cake, done. And in those initial steps, again, my lawyer brain kind of got in the way where I was like, I need a contract for these grapes. And I learned very quickly that's not how this industry works at all. It's a lot of just like, yep, they'll be there when we say they're there. You got to trust me. And so after that experience, I kind of was like, I don't know if this is the right fit. So I was looking around for other growers, and I ended up having to transport my fruit, which was, I was illy advised against it. Like, if you can get delivery, do it. But I was like, nah, I'm gonna really get in and kind of do all of it. And I mean, besides for the actual harvest, but so yeah, it was an experience. For my Pinot Noir, I got to go out to the vineyard several times and check bricks and do all that stuff, which was really fun, just to kind of be like, I'm doing this. But the day of harvest, I got to get there early in the morning when the harvest crew got there and hang out with them and watch what they do. And I got to drive the fruit all the way from the vineyard up to Portland, which was an experience. And a really long day. I mean, I think I got up at like 6 a.m, got there, got the fruit, got the fruit to the winery at like 10, and was there till like, 10 p.m. processing it all. And it was like, okay, got through this. And then everything that happens after the fact, too. So, luckily my fruits were staggered. I kind of, when I was going in, I was thinking like, all this is gonna happen in 2 weeks and it's gonna be like done. And it wasn't. My fruit from Southern Oregon got delayed by about a month. I know, like everyone around the winery was like, is your fruit coming? And I was like, I hope so. But luckily I got my Sauvignon Blanc from OSU's vineyard. They have like their research vineyard down there, which was awesome. And the fruit was great. But when I had made that connection with them, Alec, who runs that program, was like, Alex Celis from down the street from you is also getting fruit from me, so it'd probably be in your best bet to have him get your fruit to Salem so you don't have to come down here. So that did happen. I was able to get my fruit at least to Salem, and then I transported it up to Portland in a pickup truck, which I do not suggest doing. It was pretty hairy. So, but yeah, so I got that up there, and I think it came in super late too. I mean, coming from Southern Oregon, it's not going to be in the morning ever. So it got in really late. I think I got my fruit to the winery at like 10 p.m. So we got it set out for the night and pushed it in the morning. But yeah, it was, I mean, I knew going into it was going to be a lot of work, but it was much more work than I had anticipated, which is kind of how everything works for me. I'm always like, this will be easy. And I'm like, maybe not that easy, but it was really fun. It was a really good experience. I mean, I got to pretty much do everything in the winery myself with a little bit of supervision, but yeah, it was really cool. I mean, going from making 5 to 10 gallons of cider at home to making 2 tons of wine, like trying to envision what that would be like, I had no idea. And it was a process, but it was a lot of fun. And then all of the aftercare, was a lot of fun too. I mean, going in every day, checking on things, kind of making sure everything's going right, and if things weren't going right, asking for help and what needed to be done at that point. Yeah, it was a really fun 2-3 months.
So you mentioned obviously selling wine, everyone's favorite thing to do, selling wine. Tell me about your sort of thoughts on getting your wine out into the world and on how you're going to approach the second year.
Yeah, it's a lot to consider of how it's going to happen. So I think we are still going to have some help in that regards as far as like marketing and all of that with this program I'm in. However, my initial plan, I don't have a ton of wine to sell, but I do need to sell it. So I think I will probably be hopping around little farmers markets is the plan. I've been speaking with other winemakers, and I kind of get mixed reviews on like, yeah, farmers markets are great, or like, no, farmers markets are not great. So I'm kind of at this like crossroads of like, do I want to do that? Well, how else am I going to sell it, So I'm still really trying to figure that out, which is scary. It's really scary when you're like, okay, it's January. Hopefully my wine will be in bottles by March, hopefully. As I've learned in this industry, whatever you plan, it's add a month or add a week or, whatever the time frame is, add 10, 20%. So I say hopefully it'll be in bottles in March, which means it'll probably hopefully be in bottles by May. So yeah, I think I'm gonna try the farmer market route and see how that goes. Obviously we'll have an online presence, but like people are not going to find us that quickly either. So I don't anticipate online sales will be like skyrocketing or anything like that. I think I'll have to be out promoting it. So yeah, the plan is farmers markets. I've gotten a couple of invitations to do, little wine nights and stuff. And it's like, my wine's not in the bottles yet. So yes, I would love to do that. But, and I don't know how those kind of events will work out either. So yeah, it's scary. And I've never sold a product before in all of my career. I've always sold a service, which is also, a hard sell too. But having an actual product that I know how much it costs and not putting my time into that cost either, it's a really scary thing. So hopefully it works out. Going into next year, if I haven't sold a significant amount of this wine, I don't think it will make sense to bring in fruit for 2025. So there's a lot riding on the sales part. So yeah, right now, my husband is helping me with a lot of the stuff, getting the website set up and figuring out Beano shipper and all of this kind of stuff that goes into it. Trying to pump up social media, which for me is a challenge. There's just a lot that goes into it. And having grown a business prior, I get it. It's a lot of effort, a lot of putting effort into this to make something happen, and then eventually it does. But when you're doing it, it kind of seems like this endless hill that you're going up. So I'm just trying to keep that in the back of my head before I've even actually started the sales process. But yeah, hopefully it works out. I mean, with the amount of wine I have available, obviously distribution and being a first-year winemaker, that's like not even the cards for 3, 4, 5 years, even if I'm lucky. So everything has to be driven by me, which, yeah, it's a lot to think about. And I'm mentally preparing because I know like in the next few months, life's gonna get crazy again, even though I'm not in harvest. So
assuming things go as you hope and you're making wine this year, what will you do differently this time around?
I don't know that. Oh, I'll definitely not be moving fruit. That is not in my wheelhouse. I would love to continue making a Sauvignon Blanc every year. I think like coming into wine, that was immediately the wine that I was like, I love this. I mean, I think Sauvignon Blanc kind of has this weird past where, it was good, it wasn't good, and I do think it's coming into style and it's really popular right now, so I think that's great, but I love it. So it's really easy for me to make something that I enjoy and love, So as far as changing things, that's one thing I would like to not change. I'd like to have a Sauvignon Blanc every year. Of course, we'll see how it sells. That might change how that goes, but I would love to make some red wines next year, or maybe possibly year 3. I guess we'll see how things go, but I have kind of gotten a lot of flack from winemakers about making a rosé. They're like, you made a rosé for your first year, and it's like, well, I like rosé, so that's why I chose it, but I don't know that rosé is something I will continue pursuing. I guess we'll see. I mean, if it sells and it tastes great, so if it sells, I mean, I'll continue making it, but it seems like rosé is kind of a really difficult market, which coming into that, I didn't fully understand that, so I could see that change coming. But yeah, I still have so much to learn, so just gonna keep doing and trying, and I was really lucky that both of my ferments went pretty painlessly, so yeah, I'm sure that won't always be the case, but yeah, I won't be hauling my fruit. That's the one big lesson I learned year 1. Delivery.
Tell me about long-term aspirations. What would you hope this turns into?
So I started this as very much a side hustle, kind of like, well, I mean, the opportunity basically fell in my lap. So it wasn't certainly something I had thought about much or dreamt about much, but now I'm here and it's something I do have to think about. So I kind of, when I started, I sat down. In prior businesses, it was kind of just like, we'll figure this out as we go, and having an actual product with a cost associated with it, I was like, I want to be very diligent in figuring out how much things cost. Every single thing has a cost, and it adds up really fast. And I also want to figure out goals. Like, in other businesses, it's kind of just worked out, and I've been able to pay my bills, and life has worked. I want to actually set some very solid goals for this business. So I sat down, and before I got any of my fruit, and figured out, okay, these are my first year costs. This is how much I'm going to produce. I was way off. It was much more than I anticipated. So I've kind of gone back to the drawing board with those initial numbers I came up with and made some realistic adjustments. But ideally, I mean, I would like to see very slow growth. I mean, that has worked well for me in other endeavors. And I mean, it's always really frustrating when you start to be like, okay, by like year 3, I might be making a little bit of money. And this is a lot of effort. But I mean, it's also reality, you know? So I would like to see really small growth. I mean, I think in my projections, I did 5 years of projections. I think my goal for next year is to produce 3 tons. So I did 2 tons this year, and next year's 3 tons. And I think by the end of 5 years, my goal is to maybe be around 10 tons, which is still a really small amount of wine on the grand scheme of things. So yeah, I haven't really thought past 5 years where this would go. It was kind of like, this is what our goals are. If we're hitting them, we'll continue. And if we're a little bit off, like maybe we need to make some adjustments, or we'll see how things pan out. But I wanted to have some very clear goals so I can be realistic about it, because it is a lot of money. It's a lot of products too. I mean, it's not like if you make wine, you still have to store it somewhere, you know. It's a lot of stuff that's involved, a lot of logistics. So yeah, I think just really slow, steady growth is my goal. and hopefully that works out.
You talked earlier about exploring the Oregon wine industry and getting to know the Oregon wine industry. Tell me about your impressions of the Oregon wine industry, the people here, the wines being made. What have you kind of experienced so far with it, and where is it going? So coming to interview for that incubator program, I mean, it was weird because I had not, like I told you, I hadn't had a resume and I hadn't interviewed in a really long time for a job. So I was like, this is really nerve-wracking. And I sat down with Carrie and Corey. I think Christina, who's also mentoring me, I think she was off on a vacation somewhere, so I didn't get to meet her at that meeting. But from that initial meeting, when I sat down with them, I was just like, wow, like everyone who's in this industry is very open and they're willing to share things with you where other industries are not like that. So I immediately was like, this is really cool. Like, I haven't had this experience in any field where people are willing to help and willing to stick their neck out to help you, which I was like, this is really cool. Like, this is gonna be a huge adjustment for me, like coming from the opposite side. And that was a lot of our interview that we talked about. I was like, I'm kind of looking for this community of people to be around, and that's what they were trying to build. So it was really cool. And I mean, I kind of got that experience in Chemeketa too, where it was like, we're all one big family here to help each other, which I'm still kind of learning my footing in that industry and being open and helpful and all that. But yeah, it's a really cool industry. I mean, everyone is willing to tell you what they're doing, what they're working on. There's no secrets really, which is really cool. And I am super excited to be a part of that and like continue growing that. And hopefully one day being able to help new people who are coming into the industry. I mean, that's very far off from now, but you know, I'm really excited to see people coming into the incubator program next year that I can be like, I did this last year. Like, I can teach you something. But yeah, as a whole, I'm really excited. I mean, when I moved to Salem, I didn't know anything about the wine industry, and then learning that this was here this whole time and that there's so much to explore, it's really, really exciting. Like, we're in one of the best wine regions in the entire world. So, like, what are the chances? As far as going forward, I'm really excited for Oregon's sparkling wine scene. I mean, I know that it's already exploding at this point, but I mean, personally as a consumer, I'm not a huge red wine drinker. I enjoy it, but you know, seeing that a lot of producers are moving towards sparkling and more sparkling varietals are getting planted and the climate's kind of more agreeable for it now, I think that's super exciting to see what is that gonna look like in 10, 20 years? And I would love to be a part of it. Sparkling wine is also intimidating. So, I mean, the costs,
the taxes, all that kind of stuff that goes into it is a lot. So I would love to just see that boom in Oregon and to be a part of it and hopefully be producing some of it, I think is really exciting.
You mentioned kind of goals for Dagger Daisy for your business. Tell me about other future aspirations, other things you're looking forward to in or out of wine. Are there other things on your horizon that you're excited about or projects you're about to undertake?
Oh, I am always looking for new hobbies and adventures, but I think that wine is definitely filling that bucket right now for me. I will continue to take classes at Schmidt. I think I've got 20 or so left to go, including chemistry, so wish me luck through that. I'm not sure how I got through this part of life without taking chemistry. I think most people take that in high school. But yeah, I'm going to be taking WSET 2 in the future and hopefully continuing through that. I would love to travel to some different wine regions and get that experience. I've got some high up my list that I'd like to get to. I would love to do some additional work outside of my own brand to kind of learn the industry. So hopefully there'll be some opportunities to work other harvest, things along those lines. Outside of that, I don't think I have anything else crazy going on. I think this is consuming my life at the moment. I do have a really old home that consumes a lot of my time. I like to renovate and stuff like that. So that's my time is split between renovating an old house, wine, and running my own business. So it fills my day.
Okay, last question for you. To this point, what is your greatest achievement, or what are you proudest of at the moment?
I'm really proud of the 6 barrels of wine I have sitting. As far as wine goes, it is like pinch me moment when I walk into the winery and I'm like, I made this. And it's been really exciting bringing friends and family and sharing the ups and the downs of the whole process with them, and then actually, bringing them to the winery and being like, here's my wine, So yeah, having gotten through that process, figured it all out in such a short time period and have it almost ready to drink has been really exciting. And it builds a little character and a little grit for sure. So, I got through law school and did all that, but this has been, having an actual product to be like, I made this, is really exciting and cool. So.
All right. All the questions that I have for you today. Anything I didn't ask that I should have, or anything we didn't cover today that you wanted to cover?
I think that'll do it.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your story with us, making the trip out here to McMinnville with us. Go ahead and let you off the hook.
Thank you.
Thank you.